Hello friends, welcome to Social Topper. Today myself Pranav Suchindran will be teaching you the first chapter in Class 10 Social Science History, that is the Rise of Nationalism in Europe. So this chapter is a quite big chapter. So I'll be covering the explanatory sessions for this chapter in four parts. So now let us look at the first part and start with today's session. So this chapter begins with a painting. This painting was painted by Frederick Soreau. He was a French artist. He prepared a series of four prints visualizing his dream of a world made up of democratic and social republics, as he called them. So, this painting was painted in the year 1848. This is again a one mark question. So, as soon as we see this painting, what can we able to understand? First, we can see a lot of Christian figures in the sky, and we are able to see a statue, and we can also see lot of people marching on a line, and it looks like they are paying some respect to the statue, and we can also see few shattered remains on the floor. Okay, now let us understand what this painting says. In 1848, Frederick Soreau, a French artist, prepared a series of four prints visualizing his dream of a world made up of democratic and social republics, as he called them. So, in 1848, a French artist named Frederick Soreau prepared a series of four prints, like four paintings he prepared, and he depicted his dream of a world made up of democratic and social republics. In one of the print, it shows that the people of Europe and America, men and women of all ages and social classes, are marching in a long train and offering homage to the Statue of Liberty as they pass by it. So, according to the explanation, they claim that this is the Statue of Liberty, and we can see that people, men and women, are standing in a line and they are paying homage to this statue. On the earth, in the foreground of the image, lie the shattered remains of the symbols of absolutist institutions. So we can see the shattered remains of monarchy. That's what is depicted in the floor. In Sorayu's utopian vision, the peoples of the world are grouped as distinct nations, identifiable through their flags and national costume. So when we can see here, one group has their own costume and own flag. All the people standing in this line do not belong to the same community. They are identifiable with their flags and costume. Leading the procession, way past the Statue of Liberty are the United States and Switzerland, which by this time were already nation states. So here we can see the flag of Switzerland. So they say that United States and Switzerland have already passed that statue. France, identifiable by the revolutionary tricolor, has just reached the statue. So we can see the France like people from France, they have just reached near this statue. Interestingly, at that time, when Soreau created this image, the German peoples did not yet exist as a united nation. The flag they carry is an expression of liberal hopes in 1848 to unify the numerous German speaking principalities into a nation state under a democratic constitution. So we can see the flag of Germany here. Up to date, this same flag is only followed in Germany. This flag was designed by the liberal nationalists during the 1840s. They had an aim to unify Germany, and it led to German unification, which we will be learning in detail in the same chapter. At that time, you'll understand this point in a more clear manner. Following the German people are the peoples of Austria, the Kingdom of the Two Sicilies, Lombardy, Poland, England, Ireland, Hungary, and Russia. So, all these communities are depicted here. People from these regions are standing on this line and they are trying to pay homage to the Statue of Liberty. From the heavens above, Christ, saints, and angels gaze upon the scene. They have been used by the artists to symbolize fraternity among the nations of the world. So, as we talked earlier, we can find a lot of Christian figures on the sky. So, what do these Christian figures symbolize? They symbolize fraternity. This is again a 1 mark question. They can ask as an MCQ, they can give this painting and ask what do the Christian figures on the sky symbolize? They symbolize fraternity. Now, during the 19th century, nationalism emerged as a force which brought about sweeping changes in the political and mental world of Europe. So, during the 19th century, nationalism emerged as a mass force which brought about sweeping changes in the political and mental world of Europe. And what did this lead to? The end result was the origination of nation states. So, as given in our textbook, modern states came first and then nation states came. Now, let us understand the elements of nation state. So, majority of its citizen and not only its ruler. So, only rulers don't exist. There is a majority of citizens in those countries. And the ruler and the citizens shared a history and a sense of common identity and descent. These are the three main features of or elements of nation state. Now, before we go into French Revolution, I will give you a short description on what is modern state. Authority, having a sovereign control over a well-defined area, is referred to as modern state. Now let me give you the definitions or meanings of few words given in our textbook which can be asked as 1 mark questions. What is the meaning of absolutist? A government or system of rule that has no restraints on the power exercised is referred to as absolutist. Utopian. What is utopian? A vision of a society that is so ideal that is unlikely to actually exist is known as a utopian vision. These can be asked as 1 mark questions. Now let us go to French Revolution, and we had learned in detail about French Revolution in class 9. This year we will be learning on after the French Revolution, the French revolutionaries took power and what happened we will be learning as a small unit this year. The first clear expression of nationalism came up with the French Revolution. So as we know, French Revolution was the first clear expression of nationalism. And we also know that French Revolution became the inspiration for other revolutions in other countries surrounding Europe. France was a full-fledged territorial state in 1789 under the rule of an absolute monarch. So, as we learned last year, the absolute monarch was Louis XVI. During his reign, it was a full-fledged territorial state. And after the French Revolution, there was transfer of sovereignty from the monarchy to a body of French citizens. The revolution proclaimed that it was the people who would henceforth constitute the nation and shape its destiny. Now let us look at the steps taken by the French revolutionaries. This is again a solid 5 mark question and it is repeated in most of the question papers. The idea of la patrie, the fatherland, and le citoyen, the citizen, was introduced. The French flag was newly designed and the formal royal flag was replaced. The Estates General was elected by the French citizens and it was renamed as National Assembly. A centralized administrative system with uniform laws for all the citizens was established. Internal custom duties and dues were abolished. So during the time of monarchy, the government would have many ways to extract people from to extract the money from the people such that they can run the government. One such way was custom duties, and those custom duties were abolished during this time. A uniform system of weights and measures was adopted. French became the common man's language, and regional dialects were discouraged. So the people were forced to speak French, and the regional dialects were discouraged. New hymns were composed, oaths were taken, and martyrs were commemorated. And these French revolutionaries further declared that it was the mission and the destiny of the French nation to liberate the peoples of Europe from despotism. In other words, to help other peoples of Europe to become nations. So the revolutionaries, that is the French revolutionaries, they further declared that it was their mission and destiny that they want to liberate the peoples of Europe from despotism in like the other parts of Europe which were under monarchical control. They said that we will take up the job of liberating the other countries from despotism. Establishment of Jacobean clubs paved way for French armies that carried the idea of nationalism and moved to Holland, Belgium, Switzerland, and Italy. So the establishment of these Jacobean clubs helped in spreading the idea of nationalism to these parts, that is Holland, Belgium, Switzerland, and Italy. With the outbreak of the Revolutionary Wars, the French armies began to carry the idea of nationalism abroad. So the idea of nationalism was carried abroad through Revolutionary Wars. So the next topic is about Napoleon. Now let us understand in detail after Napoleon came to power what happened. So who was Napoleon? He was a military leader in France. Due to political vacuum, Napoleon came into the picture. So he became as a king due to the political vacuum which surrounded France at that time. With his introduction, democracy was destroyed. So, as soon as Napoleon took power, he destroyed democracy and brought monarchical regime. Now, let us understand the reaction of the people to Napoleon in Europe. In the areas conquered, the reactions of the local populations to French rule was mixed. They had a mixed reaction as soon as Napoleon took power. Initially, French armies were welcomed as harbingers of liberty in certain cities like Brussels, Holland, Switzerland, etc. So, in these cities, they initially thought that a new personality has come, like Napoleon. He would help us in bringing a good government and he would rule us in a proper manner. But this initial enthusiasm later turned hostile due to increased taxation, censorship, and forced conscription. So, this is again a two-mark question. Uh, how was the reaction to Napoleon's rule as soon as he took power? So, these 4 points have to be covered. What were the reasons why it turned hostile was increased taxation, censorship, and forced conscription. Increased taxation is nothing but the sudden increase in taxes than the earlier limit. Censorship refers to the government, that is a monarchical government, having control over the media and newspapers and press. And forced conscription refers to forcing the people to join the army such that they can fight wars. All seem to outweigh the advantages of the administrative changes. So, in the next slide, we'll be seeing what were the administrative changes brought by Napoleon. So, these three things outweighed the advantages brought by the administrative changes. And we can see a picture here. This can be asked for 2 marks. Describe this picture. So here Napoleon is depicted as a postman. So we can see a bag-like structure where postcards are flying out of it. The courier of Rhineland loses all that he has on his way from Leipzig. So the Battle of Leipzig in 1830 was a huge defeat for Napoleon. So after the battle, slowly he's losing all the territories that were in his control. So in this picture, we can see in each postcard, the name of one territory is written. Now let's move to the next slide. Napoleonic Code or Civil Code of 1804. This is again a solid 5-mark question, and this is also repeated in most of the question papers. So these Napoleonic Code depict what were the administrative changes brought by Napoleon. First, he established equality before law and took away all the privileges based on birth. So, as we can see, during the time of French Revolution, the French society was divided into 3 categories: the clergy, the nobility, and your common men. So, the clergy and nobility, by birth, they had a lot of privileges. But during the reign of Napoleon, those privileges were abolished. Secured the right to property, he simplified administrative divisions and abolished the feudal system. He freed the peasants from serfdom and manorial dues. During that time, the peasants were tortured like anything through serfdom and manorial dues. Napoleon came and removed them. Guild restrictions were removed. Transportation and communication systems were improved. So, in terms of transport and communication, he brought a lot of improvements. Standardized system of weights and measures were introduced. A common national currency to facilitate the movement and exchange of goods was established. So, Napoleon brought a lot of good changes. That's what this slide says, and this is a solid 5 mark question and an important question as well. Now, let's move to the next slide. The making of nationalism in Europe. That is our next topic. During the mid 18th century, no nation states in Europe were there. There were no nation states. They were divided into kingdoms, duchies, and cantons whose rulers had their autonomous territories. Eastern and Central Europe were under the autocratic monarchies. So, by the kings and queens, they were ruled. In these kingdoms lived different people with different culture and identities. So, people belonging to different cultural backgrounds were together in these places. They even spoke different languages and belonged to different ethnic groups. So, their ethnicity was also different. The Habsburg, for example, the Habsburg Empire that ruled over Austria Hungary region was a patchwork of many different regions and peoples. It included the Alpine regions, the Tyrol, Austria, Sudetenland, and Bohemia, and also included Italian speaking province of Lombardy and Venetia. So, this is can be asked as a 3 mark or 5 mark question. During the mid 18th century, Europe was not divided as nation states as they exist today. Justify the statement. So, for that, first you have to give an intro with these 3 points and then take up the example of the Habsburg Empire and explain in detail. And this is also a repeated question in most of the question papers. Now, let us look about the Habsburg Empire in detail. As I mentioned in the earlier slide, Habsburg Empire was a patchwork of many different regions and people. It included the Alpine regions, the Tyrol, Austria, and the Sudetenland, as well as Bohemia, and Italian speaking provinces of Lombardy and Venetia. In Hungary, half of the population spoke Magyar, while the other half spoke a variety of dialects. In Galicia, the aristocracy spoke Polish language. Such differences did not easily promote a sense of political unity. The only tie binding these diverse groups together was a common allegiance to the emperor. So they were not united as ethnically and culturally, they were different people. So up to this point, you have to write for the question that I mentioned in the earlier slide. Now let's move on. Let's understand how the society was divided during that time. During that time, the society was divided into two classes. One is the aristocracy class and another is the peasantry class. Now let us look at the aristocrats. Socially and politically, they were very powerful. So they were powerful people, united by a common way of life. They had a common way of living. They owned large estates and townhouses in the countryside. So this shows how rich they were. They spoke French for a purpose of diplomacy and in high in the society. So to shine high or to look high in the society, they spoke French and they also used it for purpose of diplomacy. And often the aristocratic families were connected by a ties or ways of marriages. However, the aristocrats comprised of a smaller group. So in number they were small, but they were rich. Now let us look at the peasantry class or the peasants. They comprised a majority population. In Western Europe, majority land were farmed by tenants and small owners, and Eastern and Central Europe serfs cultivated the land in those regions. Emergence of the new middle class, second half of the 18th century. Now let us look at what happened in the second half of the 18th century. Western and parts of Central Europe. Growth of industrial production and trade led to growth of towns and emergence of commercial classes. So, as soon as there was increase in industrial production and trade, it led to the emergence of commercial classes. Commercial classes refer to the people who worked in these production industries. Their existence was based on the production for the market. So they lived uh, during those times. They lived, or they for their living, they were highly dependent on the production for the market. Industrialization began in England in the second half of the 18th century, but in France and parts of German states, it occurred only during the 19th century. So it was quite late when it occurred, but first it happened in England. In its wake, new social groups came into being, a working class population and middle classes. During this time only, the working class or middle class is developing, or they are emerging during this time only. Both the classes were made up of industrialists, businessmen, professionals, teachers, artisans, etc. The new social class, commercial, it is also known as commercial class, working class, or middle class. They advocated the idea of national unity. They were against the aristocratic privileges. They later became force of a lot of revolutions in Europe against monarchy. So these people became the key pillars who accelerated the revolutions and movements against the monarchy. They were against the autocratic and aristocratic regimes, and they wanted national unity. What is liberal nationalism? This is our next topic. First, let us understand what is liberalism. Ideas of national unity in early 19th century Europe were closely allied with the ideology of liberalism. Liberalism, this word is derived from a Latin term liber. Liber refers to free and stood for equality before law. Liber refers to free. So freeing is referred to as liberalism. Political liberalism. So liberalism referred in different notions under different contexts. So, under the context of political liberalism, we have to mention these points. First, it referred to a government by consent and end of autocratic and clerical privileges, inviolability of private property, constitution and representative government through parliament, no voting rights for those without property. This is what political liberalism referred to. This can be asked as a 2-mark question. Write in a brief note about political liberalism. Here, equality before the law did not necessarily stand for universal adult franchise or universal adult suffrage. This is again a 3-mark question where all these points to be covered. They will give this first line in quotes and ask you to justify. During revolutionary France, the right to vote and to get elected was granted exclusively to the property owning men. As we learned last year in French Revolution, the voting right was given to only property owning men, and men without property and all women were excluded from political rights. Like they didn't get the right to contest elections, or they didn't get the basic right to vote as well. Only for a brief period under the Jacobeans did all adult males enjoy suffrage. All adult males enjoyed suffrage only during the reign of Maximilian Robespierre, where the Jacobeans ruled over the country. However, the Napoleonic Code went back to limited suffrage and reduced women to the status of a minor, subject to the authority of fathers and husbands. This can be asked as a 1-mark question. During whose reign were women considered to the status of a minor? That was during the reign of Napoleon. Throughout the 19th and earlier 20th, early 20th centuries, women and non-property men organized opposition movements demanding equal political rights. So almost up to early 20th centuries, neither women nor non-property owning men got the right to vote. So they organized so many movements and other revolutionary activities such that or hoping that they would get those rights, but nothing happened. This is again a solid 3 mark question which has to be taken into consideration. Now, let us look at what is economic liberalism or liberalism in the economic front. It stood for freedom of markets. It also stood for abolition of state imposed restrictions on the movements of goods and capital. So, if they ask what is economic liberalism, these 2 points to be mentioned. At times, it can be asked as a 2 mark question. Example, during the first half of the 19th century, Napoleon's administration created a confederation of 39 states. Each has its own currency and weights and measures. Custom barriers in each city hindered economic growth and exchange. As each region had its own system of weights and measures, this involved time consuming calculations. So during this time, trade was very difficult because for trading there were a lot of barriers which hindered trading, and it was also very time consuming. Such conditions were viewed as obstacles to economic exchange and growth by the new commercial classes who argued for creation of unified economic territory, allowing the unhindered movement of goods, people and capital. So when you look at our NCRT textbook, there is this example given. A merchant traveling from Hamburg to Nuremberg had to pass through so many custom barriers, and in each custom barrier he had to pay 5% tax. And he was a cloth merchant. The measurement of cloth during that time was LA, and this LA measured different, it had different values in each territory. So trading was very difficult during that time. That's what that example in our textbook states. Next, now let us talk about Zollverein Customs Union. Now we saw how many problems were faced by the merchants and other people who were into trading. The initiative of Persia in 1834 established this Zollverein Customs Union. Write a short note on Zollverein's Customs Union is again a 2 mark or 3 mark question. So what did this customs union do? First, it abolished the tariff barriers. It reduced the number of currencies from 30 to 2. It promoted a network of railways to promote mobility. So basically, it also improved the railways. A wave of economic nationalism strengthened the wider nationalist sentiments growing at that time. So Zollverein had solved the major issues of the merchants and other traders. What they faced, those issues had been solved by Zollverein, and it was the initiative of Prussia. It was whose initiative is again a 1 mark question in an MCQ they can ask. Zollverein Customs Union together they can ask for 2 or 3 marks. A new conservatism after 1815. Now let us look at what happened after 1815. In the year 1815, at the Battle of Waterloo, Napoleon was defeated by the conservatives. Realized modern army, an efficient bureaucracy, a dynamic economy, the abolition of feudalism and serfdom could strengthen the autocratic monarchies of Europe. This was the belief of the conservatives. Okay. Now let us understand who are conservatives. People who believed in traditional institutions of state and society, example monarchy, church, family, clergy, etc., with changes initiated by Napoleon, are considered to be conservatives. Most conservatives, however, did not propose a return to the society of pre-revolutionary days. They don't want to go back to the pre-revolutionary days. They were resistant to any idea of change before French Revolution. They were completely against to going back to the ideas or regimes before French Revolution. Rather, they realized from the changes initiated by Napoleon that modernization could in fact strengthen traditional institutions like the monarchy. It could make state power more effective and strong. So what they thought was few reforms brought by Napoleon would strengthen the conservative regime. Next, Treaty of Vienna of 1815. First, where this treaty occurred, it happened in Vienna. in the year 1815. All these three things which are mentioned in the box are solid 1 mark questions or MCQs. They can be asked. Who are the members? BARP, a small short form through which you can remember: Britain, Austria, Russia, and Prussia. These were the four countries who fought against Napoleon in the Battle of Waterloo and defeated Napoleon. And then they took France and its corresponding territories under their control. Who hosted this? This was hosted by the Austrian Chancellor, whose name was Duke Metternich. What was the key aim of this treaty? They want to bring back conservatism or restore the monarchy regime in Europe after Napoleon's defeat. Changes brought by the treaty. What are the features of the Treaty of Vienna, or what were the proposals that were put forward in the Vienna Congress? All these are 5 mark questions, and these same points have to be written. The Bourbon dynasty was restored to power in France. So when was this deposed? It was deposed, or the Bourbon dynasty was thrown out during French Revolution. But now that same Bourbon dynasty is restored to power in France. France lost the territories it had annexed under Napoleon. So France gained a lot of territories during the reign of Napoleon, and France had to lose all those. Territories were divided to prevent French expansion. Boundaries were set up. So around French, so many territories were put up such that France would never expand in the future. And those territories that France had annexed under the reign of Napoleon were divided among Britain, Austria, Russia, and Prussia. For example, Russia took over uh, Poland. Area surrounding the Poland region were took over by Russia. The Kingdom of the Netherlands was set up in north, and Genoa was added to Piedmont in the south. Prussia was given territories on western frontiers, while Austria was given control of northern Italy. But the German Confederation of 39 states that had been set up by Napoleon was left untouched. In the east, Russia was given part of Poland, while Prussia was given a portion of Saxony. So these last 4 points show how the territories were divided among Britain, Austria, Russia, and Prussia. Next, conservative regimes set up in 1815 were highly autocratic. This is again a solid 3 mark or 5 mark question. They will directly give the statement and ask you to justify. During the conservative regime, the government did not tolerate criticism and dissent. They did all sort of activities to curb the activities that questioned legitimacy of the autocratic government. So they didn't like the questioning the legitimacy of their autocratic government. Then censorship law was imposed on newspaper, books, plays, etc. So there was a lot of censorship. No one had the liberty to directly express their views. So this is a picture of the Club of Thinkers, an anonymous caricature dating to the 1820. So they can ask, what does this picture describe? You have to write the Club of Thinkers. This is a caricature. This can be asked as a 1 mark question. This motivated the liberal nationalists to fight for freedom of press. Like when there was high censorship, the liberal nationalists couldn't gather people with them, or they couldn't express their views, or they couldn't forward their views to a large audience. So one of the main demands of the liberal nationalists was the freedom of press. Now let us go to the next topic, that is revolutionaries. Who were revolutionaries? Revolutionaries were liberal nationalists who belonged to educated middle class. They were elites. These liberals became revolutionaries with a motive to overthrow monarchy. So this can be asked as a 1 mark question. What was the main motive of revolutionaries? To overthrow monarchy. After 1815, fear of repression drove many liberal nationalists underground and led to the formation of secret societies. So after 1815, when that conservative regime was established in France, this made many liberal nationalists to create secret societies. So in secrecy, they created societies and planned for revolutionary activities. Members, liberal nationalists, began to operate underground. So secretly, they started creating societies and groups, and they sought to gather people such that they can plan for some revolutionary activity against the autocratic conservative regime. What were the objectives? The objectives were commitment to oppose monarchical reforms, first objective, then to fight for freedom and liberty, and oppose autocratic regime. Basically, they were totally against monarchy and autocratic monarchical regime. Now let us look at a famous revolutionary, Giuseppe Mazzini. He was an Italian revolutionary born in Genoa in the year 1805. In old textbooks, if you check, it is given as 1807, but according to the new NCRT 2025-26 edition, it is 1805. So kindly follow this one. He was also a member of a secret society of that time, that was Carbonari. He founded two secret societies. One was Young Italy in Marseilles and Young Europe in Bern. Young Italy is located in France and Young Europe is located in Germany. He believed that God had intended nations to be the natural units of mankind. They can give this statement directly in an MCQ and ask who said this statement. It was given by Giuseppe Mazzini. Italy could not continue to be a patchwork of small states and kingdoms. So he was from Italy, so he made this statement. Even this statement could be given and asked in an MCQ. Unification alone could be the basis of Italian liberty. So there is a topic in this same chapter known as Italian unification. Mazzini was the first person to bring up a spark among the Italians that Italy requires unification. And among the three leaders of Italian unification, Giuseppe Mazzini plays an important role, and he was the first one to bring that spark. Mazzini's relentless opposition to monarchy and his vision of democratic republics frightened the conservatives. So, all his activities were against the autocratic monarchical regime. So, his activities were not liked by those conservatives. Metternich, Duke Metternich, who hosted the Vienna Congress, described him as the most dangerous enemy of our social order. This is again an important statement, could be asked in an MCQ. Following his model, many secret societies were set up in Germany, France, Switzerland, and Poland. So, with this, we can end our session for today, and I'll be posting a video tomorrow on the second part. This is as I said earlier, this is a big chapter, and minimum I need 4 sessions to cover this. At a stretch, it can be covered, but it will be very tiresome. So I'm making it into 4 sessions. So please like, share, and subscribe to my YouTube channel. And as soon as this complete chapter is over, I'll be posting a practice paper only on the Rise of Nationalism in Europe chapter. Kindly make the best use of it. Thank you very much.